We want to remind our listeners that this program is for informational and educational purposes only and not intended to substitute for professional veterinary medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The Animal Medical Center does not recommend or endorse any products or services advertised by SiriusXM.
Welcome to Ask the Vet with Dr. Ann Hohenhaus. This is the place to talk about your pets and get advice with a top veterinarian from the Animal Medical Center in NYC. Hear from the leading authorities on animals and ask your questions. Now, here's your host, Dr. Ann Hohenhaus.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Ann Hohenhaus, a senior veterinarian here at the Schwarzman Animal Medical Center and also director of pet health information. We're coming to you from New York City today, and you're listening to Ask the Vet podcast. It's a program for pet-loving people. Actually, maybe I'll take that back. It's a program for animal-loving people because I'm going to talk about giraffes a little bit today. And I'm really glad that everyone has joined us here on Ask the Vet. As a pet parent, you know there'll be intense heartbreak following the loss of a beloved pet companion, and nothing can truly prepare you for the grief that comes with that loss. But today on our podcast, I'm going to talk with my colleague, Judith Harbour. She's AMC's staff veterinary social worker, and she's going to talk about how to survive the pain of losing a pet, how to be supportive to someone experiencing the loss, and how we can honor a pet's memory. And this is a double guest day. And so I'm also going to talk with Sara Bader about her wonderful new book, The Book of Pet Love and Loss. So I hope you'll stay tuned for this important conversation today. The Ask the Vet podcast is available on the Sirius app and also across all major podcast platforms and as well as on AMC's website. And the address of that website is www.amcny.org. And this all happens thanks to AMC's longstanding partnership with SiriusXM. So we hope you'll like and follow our Ask the Vet podcast to stay current on important pet health information. And we'd really appreciate it if you would take a moment to give us a review. Now, don't forget that the Schwarzman Animal Medical Center is the only level 1 veterinary trauma center in New York City, and we're also the largest not-for-profit animal hospital in the world. On every Ask the Vet podcast, I answer questions about your pet's health. All you have to do is email me, and I'll answer your question on next month's Ask the Vet program. The email is easy to remember, but I'll give it again later in the show if you need to get a pen and paper to write it down. The email address is askthevet@amcny.org. Again, ask the vet, all one word, at amcny.org. And now it's time for our trending animal of the month.
It's time for the internet's most talked about animal.
The Bright Zoo in Washington County, Tennessee, recently welcomed a baby girl giraffe, but she's no ordinary giraffe. She was born without spots. According to giraffe experts, she is the only solid-colored reticulated giraffe, that's a special subspecies of giraffes, living anywhere on the planet. And when I first read that headline, my mind immediately had a vision of a cream-colored giraffe, because to me, the spots on a giraffe are brown. And so I thought the spots would go away and underneath the spots would be a cream-colored giraffe. But I was wrong. She's all brown. A giraffe's spotted coat is a form of camouflage in the wild, but it provides more than cover. The Giraffe Conservation Foundation says that each spot, or they call them patches, has a system of blood vessels beneath the area that act as a thermal window and allows the release of body heat in the hot African sun. Tony Bright, the Bright Zoo's founder, says that this special giraffe will bring much needed global attention to the issue of giraffe conservation. Bright stated that the wild populations of giraffes are slipping almost into extinction, and we've lost 40% of the wild giraffes in just the last 30 years alone. At birth, the baby girl giraffe stood 6 feet tall, and just yesterday, it was announced that her name is Kapiki, which is Swahili and means unique. And truly, she is a unique giraffe. The contest to name her was sponsored by the zoo. And if you want more information and photos of this brown giraffe without spots. Just Google baby giraffe born without spots. It's my pleasure to welcome my first guest to today's show. And this guest has been a previous guest on Ask the Vet and is my colleague at AMC, Judith Harbour. She's AMC's veterinary social worker, and she's become an integral part of our AMC team. She provides support and counseling to the veterinary staff as well as AMC clients, facilitates our pet loss group, and supports all USDAN Institute activities. Judith also created a compassion fatigue program for our veterinary staff. And as a licensed clinical social worker, she previously worked at Menominee Medical Center and also served as a senior mental health clinician at the Young Adult Institute, both right here in New York City. On September 14th, so that's coming up soon if you're listening to the first broadcast of this podcast, Judith will be the speaker at AMC's 6th annual Celebration of Life Pet Memorial event. It's an online event, and I'm going to provide more details about this event later on in our show. Thanks, Judith, for being here today, and happy to have you on Ask the Vet.
Thanks, Anne. I'm really happy to be here with you.
So let's jump right into our topic for today, which is the pain of losing a beloved pet. It can be really causing a lot of grief and sorrow for people. And for some people, it's even bigger than losing a beloved family member. So what would a person who's recently lost a pet be experiencing and feeling?
Well, thanks, Anne. And I know it's a hard topic to talk about, but I think it is important because it affects every single person who loves an animal. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation. But I think that one of the first things that often people experience is surprise. And the surprise being just how deeply they are affected by the loss of their pet. For a lot of people, it does hit them in a different way and maybe a more intense way than the loss of humans in their lives, sometimes even close family members like parents or siblings or spouses. And that can feel uncomfortable and scary. And so it can take some adjusting to accept, how deeply the loss is affecting you. But I guess one main experience that a lot of people have, especially after the loss of a pet, is a sense of physical pain and emptiness that doesn't always come when people lose a human family member. And I think it's because of the intimacy between people and their pets. They're with us for every hour of every day. They're physically close to us, and it can feel almost physically painful when people's pets pass away to be missing their warmth and their smell and the physical proximity. So especially in the early days, a lot of clients report, those types of really intense feelings and emptiness.
So that's interesting that, you comment that pets are with us all day, every day, whereas like your mother, you might see her 3 or 4 times a year, depending on how far away she lives. But do you think the pandemic has distorted a lot of the people-pet relationships to different levels on a variety of issues? Do you think people are having a harder time with pet loss post-pandemic than pre-pandemic?
Well, this is purely anecdotal observations, but I think that the pandemic experience is part of people's story with their pets. And I can't really I don't wanna make a blanket statement that it has made people's experiences more or less difficult with regard to coping with the loss. I think for some people, it feels less painful in a way because they know they have spent really meaningful time with their pet and didn't have to worry about sort of juggling the work and caretaking role as much. So there's that sense of peace. For other people, yeah, the attachment is that much greater, and so the loss feels that much more acute. And people are also dealing with a lot of other losses that they've experienced that might compound the difficulty after they've lost their pet.
I don't know, somehow naively, I thought that when the pandemic was over, it would be over. And it still affects my patients today. Not that they're sick or that their owners are sick, but there's lingering effects of people going back to the office. And I had a pet in last week that has lost 5 pounds. And I was, oh my gosh, I said, is the cancer back? What's going on? And after a lot of testing and another conversation with the owner, she actually thinks it's because she was home for 2 years and now she feels like she can go out more and the dog won't eat when she's not home. And so that's just one example of how the pandemic is impacting pets and people, even though I sort of think it's kind of over, but it still keeps cropping up, which is why I asked you that question. So, what do you advise these grief-stricken owners to do to help them cope with the loss of their pet?
Well, people ask me that too, the people going through going through the loss, and, when it happens, it can feel like the pain of it will sort of never be gone, or at least that intensity. And so when people talk to me, they say, "What can we do about it? How do we cope? How do we get through this? It's gonna be this painful forever." And I think a lot of it is being able to kind of ride the experience. And I think the thing that helps people the most is to have patience and compassion for themselves as they go through it, and to allow themselves to sort of feel whatever they're experiencing and accept it for what it is. And it can just add a layer of pain and suffering when they're doubting, or when they're self-criticizing, or thinking they should be feeling better already, and that can actually hinder the process. And so I often work with people on really trying to accept themselves for wherever they're at, and have that patience to go through the ups and downs that they're going to go through. But the other thing that I think is so important, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, is being, finding support, and finding places where you can tell your story and be accepted by others for what you're going through. And that really can be so healing. Telling your story, telling your pet's story, is immensely healing.
And everyone, I would say, clients have told me that everyone that they want to tell their story of their pet to is not always receptive to that story. And they feel that friends will sometimes judge them for feeling sorry about it's just a cat, or it's just a dog, or if it's just a horse. And I think that recognizing that everyone is not going to understand why you feel how you feel is maybe something that clients have expressed to me has helped them, is that they are cautious to tell their story because they don't always know what the audience is going to be like.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely tell people to protect themselves and, to kind of know their audience. And, if you know that there's someone in your life who's going to dismiss your grief, you know, maybe better to share your feelings with people who are supportive. And I think oftentimes it is, the veterinarian who they know is an animal person and also love their pet. And so that relationship between, actually, reminds me, something that comes up a lot for people. This is a little bit off topic, but
Anything
peop
about animals is on topic on Ask the
okay,
Vet.
so it's about, it's related. So part of what people experience when they go through any loss is something called a secondary loss, and that is all kind of the knock-on, follow-on, losses that you experience that are kind of a result of the primary loss. So, for example, with an animal, you are grieving the loss of your pet, but also maybe of a community of in the dog run or of a routine or even a piece of your identity. So all these little things are different losses that you might grieve. And many people have said that they grieve the loss of their relationship with their pet's veterinarian because for a lot of clients, especially at AMC, they have been coming here and they've been caregiving and working with their pet's medical team sometimes for years. And there's a really strong partnership, and they really feel the loss of that when their pet passes away.
Well, and I would say that we feel the loss of those favorite pets that come to see us for years at a time. I've worked pet cancer treatments around new babies and weddings and special anniversaries and trips and things. And so those people become part of the fabric of your life as well. And New Yorkers do really interesting things, and they talk about where they've been and what book they've read. And I find the people as wonderful as the pets. And I absolutely miss these people when they're no longer in my life. So the loss thing at the death of a pet is mostly obviously for the pet owner, but those of us on this side of the pet grieve a little bit too. And we admire people for the great care that they give. We admire them for their stick-to-itiveness when against all odds the pet does better. There's a lot of things that we admire clients for because they are so wonderful with their pets. So that brings up a good question. And is the reason to have pet loss groups to provide that safe place for people to tell stories?
That is probably the primary goal, yes, to create communities where people can tell stories, can be sad together. One of the things that we talk about in our groups is sort of accepting people for where they're at that night when they show up. And that might be as a very tearful and sad person, or that might be someone kind of laughing about anecdotes that they're remembering or feeling peace that they had a long life with their pets. So it is certainly one of the most powerful things. And actually my role as facilitator is really to step back as much as possible and just guide that connection between the people who are at the meeting versus, I try to insert myself actually as little as possible. And really my role is to create the holding space for everybody to make those connections.
So have you ever had clients that make good friends out of that group? Do you know?
I don't know.
We
Uh,
we've had some oncology clients who the people's pets were on the same chemo schedule, and
yeah,
ultimately the ladies would only book the 11 and the 11:30 appointments, and they go out to lunch afterwards.
that that
And
is
that was like a
amazing.
mutual support system. It was really quite fun to see that happen out of the oncology waiting room. So I think that that's really a fun thing to watch when it happens.
Yeah, yeah, that is one thing that I wish there were a bit more of a forum for. I haven't quite figured out what that would look like, to create more of a community outside the group itself, but I know it's something that would be meaningful for people.
So part of your role at AMC is to help clients, but you also help AMC people that work here. Can you talk a little bit about what your role is doing that?
Sure. So my role with the staff is sort of as it relates to clients, it is to support the relationship between the client and the medical team. And that can be with sort of helping them with communication or enhancing the amount of supportive communication that's involved with a case. But also, my role is to support the well-being of the staff here. And that looks several different ways. It can be programming, educational content about stress management and compassion fatigue, some events, wellness events that we do in the hospital that can be a nice release. Sometimes we're doing crafts or trying to just take a break from the day-to-day stresses. And then I talk with folks one-on-one and help them to make sense of some of the experiences they have as a veterinary professional and to manage stress on an individual level, but also to process some of the really sometimes emotional and challenging experiences that they have here.
So we just have about a minute left. And so I want to remind listeners that I'll give information about the upcoming Celebration of Life event a little bit later in the show. But Judith is our featured speaker. And at that event, which the second Sunday in September has for 50 years been National Pet Memorial Day. So do you have a couple of quick thoughts on how our listeners can celebrate and honor their beloved pet?
I hope you'll come to the event, but creating a memorial of your own can be very meaningful. And to gather anecdotes and photos and memories from friends and family can really be very meaningful as well. Writing obituaries or letters to your pet is healing, and just making sure to keep their memory and legacy alive in your family and in your day-to-day life is a way to honor them because they all they all impact us and have changed us. So recognizing that and keeping that alive is probably the best way to remember them.
So I did my part this month to help celebrate Pet Memorial Day. This week's AMC blog has a list of hopeful books about pet loss, and I included books from picture books to toddlers to books about adults. And after the break, we're going to have our second guest, who's also going to talk about a book on pet loss. So I want to thank Judith Harbour, my special guest and colleague, for joining me today on Ask the Vet.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. I hope that you'll take a moment to email me with your questions about your pet's health here at askthevet@amcny.org, and I'll answer your question on next month's Ask the Vet podcast. We're going to take a brief break now, but I hope you'll stay tuned because we've got more great stuff about animals coming up.
We're back with Dr. Ann Hohenhaus on Ask the Vet.
Welcome back to Ask the Vet podcast. Before we get on to the animal news, I just want to give a special shout out to the Schwarzman Animal Medical Center, who made a $10,000 donation to the Maui Humane Society to help those poor animals tragically impacted by the Hawaiian wildfires. The donation was made on behalf of AMC's doctors and support staff. The Maui Humane Society is seeking additional funding and support. So if you're looking for a way to help Hawaii, just log on to mauihumanesociety.org. And now it's time for the animal news.
It's time for Animal Headlines, the biggest animal news from across the world.
Our first story is about Scout, a sweet stray mutt who was languishing in an animal shelter outside of Detroit when he decided to take matters into his own hands, or maybe his own paws. On 3 separate occasions, Scout escaped the shelter by climbing over a 10-foot chain link fence and running for miles, crossing a busy highway to get to the medical care nursing home. And once there, he let himself in the lobby and fell asleep on the couch. He did this 3 times, which I just find stunning. Nobody knows why Scout went there. When I first started reading the story, I said, oh, okay, the punchline is going to be that Scout's former owner got, moved to the nursing facility, but that's not true. Scout doesn't know anybody there. He somehow just picked it out as a good place to be. So the staff kind of liked Scout a lot, and the director said, well, maybe this is a sign that Scout really is meant to be here. And so Scout moved in. He was officially adopted by the staff, and now he has free reign at the facility, wandering the halls and visiting the 20 senior residents. When he was named Resident of the Month, the staff put up "Thank you for adopting us" posters in his honor. So if you want more information about the nursing home dog, just Google Scout, who made his nursing home a forever home. Great story. But how did he figure that out? Dogs are amazing sometimes. This study is about dogs, but it's actually really more about us dog owners. This is a study published in the journal Vaccine, and it reports that after COVID, more than half of U.S. dog owners are concerned about vaccinating their dogs. And get this, they're worried about the rabies vaccine. The study surveyed over 2,000 people and found that about half had concerns about the safety, efficacy, or necessity of canine vaccines. According to one of the authors, Matt Mata, canine vaccine hesitancy is pervasive, and that the authors were quite surprised at this finding. If you have a concern about your pet's vaccine, check out my recent blog, "What Vaccine Does My Pet Really Need?" And you can find that blog by logging on to AMC's website, amcny.org, and put vaccines in the search bar. And our third animal news story today is about a turtle. The Centers for Disease Control have recently put out a report about a salmonella outbreak from small turtles that has spread to 25 states and made at least 26 people sick. These are small turtles. According to the CDC, any turtle can carry salmonella, but turtles with shells that are less than 4 inches across are a known source of this illness. The CDC also made a point to warn people not to cuddle or kiss their turtles. There is a federal law that bans the sale and distribution of turtles with shells less than 4 inches across, but you can still find these turtles in pet stores, small shops, flea markets, and in roadside stands. So if you're looking for a turtle companion, only buy turtles that are bigger than 4 inches, and certainly you want to buy them from a reputable pet store, not a stand on the side of the road. Keep in mind that turtles may not be the optimal pet for children who do not understand good hand washing protocol, because washing your hands for soap and water is one of the best ways to prevent salmonella. If you want more information about turtles and salmonella, you can Google the CDC's information page by putting CDC turtle and salmonella into the search bar. And now I'd like to welcome my second guest of today's Ask the Vet. My guest is author Sara Bader, whose new book fits right into our theme for the month of pet loss. The book is called The Book of Pet Love and Loss, Words of Comfort and Wisdom from Remarkable People. And this book is a recent publication by Simon & Schuster. Sara Bader is an editor, writer, and researcher. She's worked as an acquisitions editor for Princeton Architectural Press and a senior editor for Phaedron. In addition to editing visual cultural books, she's conceived and researched quotation collections for both publishers. In 2010, Sara launched QuoteNick.com, a growing library of verified quotations, and she's a co-author of the forthcoming book, The Collars of RBG, A Portrait of Justice, to be released in November 2023. That is going to be great read, or maybe great pictures, because I do love those collars. So Sara, I'm so glad that you can join me on this special Ask the Vet program.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is totally not on topic, but is the Ruth Bader Ginsburg book a picture book or a book with text?
It's actually both. So it's co-authored with Eleanor Carucci, who's this wonderful photographer Time magazine hired to photograph the late justice's collars in the Supreme Court after she passed away. So Eleanor went to the Supreme Court and photographed a selection of collars, and then I spent time unpacking the stories behind the collars. So they're really stunning visuals that Eleanor took. The photographs are gorgeous, and then the stories behind them.
Oh, and will the photos go on tour or be in a museum somewhere?
Yes, actually, there's an exhibition opening in the Jewish Museum. I don't know the exact date, but it's going to be toward the end of this year, of the collars, and also in her gallery.
So for our listeners, Jewish Museum, you mean the one on Fifth Avenue uptown?
Yes.
So good reason for a trip to New York is another great museum exhibition. Okay, now we're back to the topic at hand. So, I've been a veterinarian for a long time, and one thing I see every single day is how much people really love their pets. And with few exceptions, maybe a parrot or two, we know that we're always going to outlive our pets. And so your book is a moving collection about that loss that we kind of know will happen when we get a pet. And I think a helpful thing to help people overcome grief. So how did you get to this particular topic?
So I got to this topic through a very personal route. I lost my cat in 2012 after she had been sick for some time. So I was prepared and I knew that it was, imminent. But after she passed away, I was just really wrecked by the heartbreak, and I was in deep mourning, and I knew I would miss her, but I was really stunned and struck by just how much it affected me, and how I was just so sorrowful in those weeks and months after. So I'm a researcher and a writer, and what I usually do in situations that are difficult is I look for a book that can help me get through whatever I'm going through. And I looked for books on pet loss that I wanted to read, and I realized that I just needed something that had kind of small, short literary installments that didn't require a ton of effort on my part, because I was really exhausted by the grief. I wanted to hear from people who had been through the experience, but I didn't have the energy to read like a memoir about it or long essays about it. I really wanted just these like small portions of literary nourishment, is I think how I phrase it in the introduction to the book. So I looked for the book and I couldn't find it, which would have been so much easier because I ended up writing the book that I needed at the time. So I pulled together, I just went deep into archives and letter collections and journals and notebooks. And I looked for stories about pet loss from cultural icons that we all are familiar with, that are beloved internationally across geography and time. And I researched it for many years, actually. It took me quite a while.
Well, I was thinking that because if the cat died in 2012, that's a decade ago. Have you been writing a decade?
No. So I started researching it in 2012, and I was working on the proposal for some time. And then I started a job at Phaidon, which is an art publisher in Manhattan. And I thought I would sort of maybe work on the proposal outside of my day job, which quickly became unrealistic. It was just not happening. And then, so I ended up leaving my staff position to work on the book and to finish it. And that was in 2020. The end of 2020 is when I really focused on it full time.
So let me be sure I understand this. You hunted down these quotes, not by interviewing people, but by digging in primary sources.
Exactly. So it was really important for me. I am a lover of quotes, but I'm also very aware that a lot of quotes are misattributed. And often you just don't know what the original source is. All over the internet, there are quote sites that you find a quote, you love it, you're not quite sure if the person said it, and if they did said it, you don't know where it came from. So at the back of my book, it was very important to me, is a very comprehensive list of every single quote and where it comes from. So if a reader wants to learn more about that writer, or read more letters by that writer, if the quote came from a particular letter collection, they know exactly where to go.
How do you even know to find those letter collections? Like, I can look up a book about cancer in an animal really quickly, but I would have no idea how to find a quote by, say, Emily Dickinson.
Well, I mean, I'm a researcher, so this is sort of my thing. the way I sort of approached it is I made a list of cultural figures who were animal lovers, cared deeply about animals, but also wrote or spoke like openly, because the
Mhm.
book moves to contemporary times. So I also have interviews and podcasts. And so I found people who were animal lovers who either wrote or spoke about their love of animals, and also, and this was the tricky part, were inspired to write about pet loss, which was a very small group of people. I mean, the book only scratches the surface. There are many more beautiful excerpts out there, but even finding these, it was, it took some time, because you could find someone who loved animals, wrote about animals, but they didn't write about how sad they were after that. They didn't write about how they felt after the animal
Mhm.
thoroughly died.
So do you have a favorite one
A favorite quote?
in your book? Yeah.
That's a really good question. The way I structured the book is it's in 5 chapters, and it goes, I didn't want to create a depressing book. I really wanted to create a book that shows the arc of the love and the loss. So the first chapter is all about the joy of the friendship. And then the second chapter is about sort of realizing that animals are getting older, and you realize that your time is limited with them, and you're sort of preparing for the end. And then the third chapter, which is right in the center of the book, is right after the animal, you've had to say goodbye to the animal. It's called It's Tough to Lose Your Shadow. And then the fourth chapter is the persistence of mourning. And then the fifth chapter is called The Final Gift, which is about this sort of the gift of the friendship. So to answer your question, do I have a favorite quote? I feel like I have many favorite quotes, because there's sort of each of those 5 sections speak to sort of a different layer, or a different kind of hue of the friendship. But that said, would you like me to read a few of my favorites?
I would love to hear your favorite one.
Okay. Well, this is one of my favorites. Let's see. There's so
And I'm
many.
just going to tell the audience, while she's flipping through her Post-it notes stuck in her book, that there is nothing I like better than an author reading from their books. It is way better than me reading the book on my own. So this makes the podcast extra special for me.
Is it okay if I read a couple, just because it's
Yeah.
so hard to choose one? So this one is by John Dickerson, the television journalist, and he wrote, and this is in the first chapter, so it's really about the joy and the bond and the connection. He wrote, "The walk is the basic unit of the human and dog commerce of unconditional love. We take care of George, and George takes care of us. No matter how awful the day, or how awful I am behaving at any given moment, George doesn't care. He finds me smoldering in my chair and dashes to my lap. Every dog is a rescue dog."
Oh, that's a good one.
I love that one.
I think we need a T-shirt that says "Every dog is a rescue dog." It'd be a good T-shirt.
And then another one, and this is from the chapter where you're sort of preparing for the loss, so you haven't said goodbye yet, is by the writer Elizabeth Gilbert. And the quote is, "My favorite monk at the ashram where I lived in India taught me that dogs have such a short lifespan because it's part of their loving service to us. They are here, among other reasons, to teach us how to die, because they are so good at it and we are so bad at it. Wanting to help, they volunteer to die early as a way of saying, look, it's not hard. Let me show you how. All you have to do is let go."
Ooh, that one is making some tears come.
I know. There's a lot of tears in the book.
But they're kind of happy tears. I mean, that's not a sad thing. It's just an emotional quote.
Yeah. I think the book, the feedback I've received is the book can get the tears going, but they're nourishing tears. They're not depleting ones. I think they're helping people, feel what they're feeling. And they're sort of hydrating tears, I think.
So what did you learn that you didn't know before you wrote this book?
I mean, the thing that I hope to learn that I didn't know if I would learn, but I did, going through it is just how universal the experience is. I think part of the heartbreak and the isolation when you lose an animal is you have this very private relationship with your cat or dog or bird, and then they pass away, and it's sort of, it feels so personal, the heartbreak, and it feels so specific. And what I learned, it helped me so much through my own process. What I learned is that this feeling is so common, and it goes across years and geography, and there's a community of people right now who are grieving their pets, and there were 100 years ago, and there will be in 100 years, and it just feels like we're all in it together, is sort of what I learned through the writing and researching of the book.
In it together, and yet you said that it's a private relationship, really strikes me, because it's usually you and the pet. It's not like where if your best friend dies, it's your best friend, but then your best friend has kids and a husband, or their mother, or there's lots of other people involved in that passing of the human and that group grieving process. But I never thought about it before, but I think that's what it is that the pet is really, it's you and the pet, and it's that relationship, and there's not a lot of other spokes in that relationship. It's not like you go out to dinner with your dog and you meet 6 friends. Well, some people might, but it still is different.
No, I think that's a really good point. It is very, very intimate and personal. Freud described it as affection without ambivalence, which I think is so beautiful, but it's very private. I think where we're all in it together comes from, in spite of the privacy and in spite of how specific and personal it is, we share the heartbreak, I think, and just knowing that you're not alone and you're not the only person feeling this, for me, made it sort of lessened the burden of the feeling.
Well, I think that's what my first guest was talking about. My first guest was AMC's social worker, and she runs a pet loss support group, and said that one of the major reasons for that group is to bring that shared community together to talk about that, because everyone is not part of that community, because everyone's not a pet lover, and sometimes you don't know who you can talk to about this intimate loss that you're suffering. And so she's echoing what you're saying, coming at it from a completely different aspect of it. You've hunted down these quotes and written a book, and she knows how people are feeling about this on a larger group thing. So the two things match very well in how both of you are thinking about the loss of a pet.
I feel like the collection is like its own impromptu historic to contemporary pet loss support group on pages. Like, you just feel like you're part of this big group of people.
Yeah, I think that's a very clever description of the book, is that it's kind of a written pet loss support group where everyone is sharing how they feel about their pet, and it's just, you're not in a room where everyone's taking turns talking about it. But it's the same concept.
Exactly. I didn't realize that it would be when I set out to write it, but that's what it feels like to me.
So when your cat died, did you participate in a pet loss group? Does that have any bearing on this?
No, I didn't. I mean, I think I think literature and writing really helps me. So that's what I really turned to. I think I would have considered it if there was one locally and I knew about it. But no, I really turned to, this felt like my pet loss support group. All these, whether it was Emily Dickinson or George O'Keeffe or Raymond Chandler, it just felt like I was with them all.
So have you been brave enough to get another cat?
Sure have. Yep, I have a cat named Pearl, who actually is in the other room, and I was assessing the risk of, should I leave the door open? Should I leave the door closed? Is she going to want to be part of the podcast? She's sleeping happily in the other room, and she, she's now a senior. I mean, not a senior, but she's 11. And she gets her senior panel blood work when I take her to the vet. And so this, I think, book, is going to help me at some point, sadly.
And where did Pearl come from?
Pearl came from a rescue group in Brooklyn. She was a street cat in Brooklyn for the first part of her life, and now she's an indoor cat with me.
Sounds like she's got a very good deal going on.
I hope she feels that. I feel like Pearl is adorable. She's very, very different from Snowflake, my last cat. Pearl's very cute and a little feisty.
What color is she?
She's a dilute calico.
I was thinking she was going to be pale gray.
No, she's because of the Pearl.
Uh-huh.
She actually came with that name. It's funny. And I tried other names on her. I wanted to call her, I think Marble was one, and Frances, and she would not. Pearl was her name.
Really?
Yep. But she's a dilute calico. She's super cute and adorable, and I love her.
Well, I think that talking about Pearl is a great way to end this conversation with my guest, Sara Bader. And just to remind everyone, her book, The Book of Pet Love and Loss, Words of Comfort and Wisdom from Remarkable People, or as she and I have just retitled the book, it's a pet loss therapy group in a book form. You don't have to go anywhere. You can read it privately at home. It's published by Simon & Schuster. And Sara, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm so happy. I really wish the door had been open so I could have seen Pearl. Thanks so much for being here on Ask the Vet.
Thank you so much.
And we're going to take a brief break and come back with questions from our listeners.
We're back with Dr. Ann Hohenhaus on Ask the Vet.
Thank you, and welcome back to Ask the Vet podcast. It's that time of the show when we take questions from our listeners. Our first question comes from Christina, as far away as Australia.
She says, my dog has lumps, but the vet said they are non-malignant lipomas. My question is, can a diet reduce them?
So maybe they can reduce them, meaning if you have a very overweight dog and the overweight dog loses weight, they will get smaller, but a diet will not completely resolve these lipomas. And many dogs who have lipomas have a bunch of them, and they're kind of lumpy all over the place. But if your veterinarian has tested them and they're not malignant, then they don't really need to be removed unless they're causing your dog a problem. So, Christina, I'm so glad you listened in Australia. I don't think we've ever had a question from Australia before. So another first here on Ask the Vet. And our second question is about a cat named Angel.
Anne's 13-year-old cat named Angel has bone cancer on her back leg. She wants to know if there are other treatment options available to treat the cancer instead of amputation.
So I'm going to tell Anne that amputation is one of the things that is a huge pain point for pet owners. And I think partly because we would be very incapacitated only having one leg. And we forget that our pets are not incapacitated because they've got 3 legs to go. So most pets do extremely well after amputation, dogs and cats. And the typical cat is back to normal within 1 month of amputation surgery. According to a recent study that was published, 80% of cats are back to normal within 4 weeks of amputation. So as sad as it seems to remove that leg, it's really the best way to treat the bone cancer. And I suspect that Angel is going to recover fabulously well from this surgery. And now we have news from the Usdan Institute. I just want to remind our listeners that tick-borne illnesses are on the rise across the country, both in people and in pets. And the Usdan Institute for Animal Health Education wants you to have these tips to protect your pet against tick-borne illnesses. First, use a monthly or quarterly tick prevention medication. Second, consider adding a tick collar that prevents ticks in addition to those monthly medications, especially if you have a pet that goes to tick areas. Like in New York City, if they go to Long Island for the weekend or Connecticut, we always prescribe a tick collar as well. Don't forget to talk to your veterinarian about a Lyme disease vaccine. We talked a little bit about vaccine hesitancy earlier in the show, and the Lyme vaccine is one of those vaccines that every dog does not need to have. So it's totally reasonable to talk to your veterinarian about that vaccine. And finally, don't forget to check your dog every day for ticks. And there is a recent blog on AMC's website about tick diseases. And in that blog, there is a very cute infographic showing where you should check your pet's body for ticks. All you have to do is log on to amcny.org/blog, and you can find the one on tick diseases. Now, I promised you earlier in the show that we would talk about the annual Celebration of Life event, which my guest Judith Harbour will be the featured speaker at. It's going to be on September 14th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You would need to register on our website, and that will get you a Zoom link that will allow you to participate in the candle lighting ceremony and watch the Pet Memorials slideshow. Registration is free for all USDAN events and required, so we have your email address so we can send you the Zoom link. To register for this event or any event at AMC, you want to go to amcny.org/USDAN events. I'd like to thank my colleague Judith Harbour and author Sara Bader both for joining me today here on Ask the Vet. As always, a special thanks to everyone who has downloaded the Ask the Vet podcast. Because of your ongoing support, the Ask the Vet podcast